There's been instances where a mom will put to bed, and based on the kind of place she actually had the delivery, she never even knew her baby had no in-laws. And a couple of days passed, and there was this baby wasn't passing stool. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about those things you should pay attention to, irrespective of your mode of delivery, whether you're going to be having a vaginal birth or a cesarean section, whatever the mode of delivery might be. Look out for these things in your baby before you take your baby home. Hello, welcome to today's video. If you're new here, this is first time moms, and on this channel we talk about health for mothers, health for new moms, for expectant moms, and health for babies. And if it's something you're interested in, join the family and let's dive right into today's video. In today's video, I'm talking about the things you should pay attention to in your baby as soon as you put to bed. You've gone through pregnancy, you've gone through delivery, and now you're with your bundle of joy. What are those things you should pay attention to before you take your baby home as a new mom or after delivery? These are the things we're going to be discussing in today's video. Of course, your caregiver, your doctors, your nurses, your midwives, and everyone will do the examination, they will check your baby, but you are still the mother of that child. So it's important to pay attention to these things. And number one on the list is, in a normal condition, in a normal baby, babies have a natural reflex to suckle on anything you put in baby's mouth. Even if you put a thumb, even if you put your finger, even if you put whatever you put in your baby's mouth, it is natural for them to suckle on it. So if you put your breast in your baby's mouth, or you put a feeding bottle in your baby's mouth, your baby should suckle on it. If you're discovering that your baby is refusing to suckle it down it's not because you're having difficulty in latching, but baby is refusing to suckle on your breast. Whatever you put in baby's mouth, baby is not taking, baby is not grabbing it with their mouth as much as you can. That is one sign you should never ignore. Do not say, oh, my baby does not like eating. No, every baby is born with a suckling reflex. This reflex will help them suckle on anything you put in their mouth, be it a feeding bottle, be it your breast, whatever you put in your baby's mouth, your baby should suckle on it. If you're seeing that your baby just refusing to feed, never ignore this sign. Even after you've gone home, never ignore this sign in your newborn. The next one is the way your baby is crying. Of course, as soon as baby is born, they're going to assess for how strong the baby is crying. But by the time baby is by your bedside, you're seeing that the cry is somehow, maybe the time baby is waking up from sleep, or when baby is hungry, the cry is not like how a normal baby should cry. Mention it to your caregiver before you leave the hospital. Don't just say, oh, it will improve in its time. Let them check your baby, call their attention to that. This is where you are noticing, you're suspecting that this cry is somehow, or this cry is not strong enough. Such signs should never be ignored in newborn. In a normal situation, babies will not pass through during pregnancy, except there are issues with the baby, which we're going to discuss in another video. So in a normal situation, babies will pass their first stool after delivery. So the first stool is usually that very dark stool that is sticky. That very dark stool, newborns must pass it between 24 hours to 48 hours after delivery. But in most cases where vaginal delivery may be discharged that same day, if your baby hasn't passed the stool while you're in the hospital, observe for that stool. So even when you get home, if it has passed 24 hours or if it has passed 48 hours and baby hasn't passed the stool, never ignore it at all. Ensure baby is assessed. Ensure you take it to the hospital and let them check baby. This is important. It's important that baby must pass the stool after delivery, and the time limit is important as well. So while you're feeding, urine will be initiated. The baby has a tendency of passing urine. Sometimes as baby is even being born, right, you can see that baby is already passing urine. Pay attention to your urine the baby is passing. As your baby is being fed, whether you're giving breast milk or you're giving infant formula, whatever you're giving at that period, the baby should pass urine. And sometimes during the cesarean section, as soon as you're bringing out the baby is passing urine, those signs are good in babies. But after delivery, you should also pay attention to these signs before you leave the hospital. Ensure baby's diapers are wet before you take your baby home. Before you leave the hospital, ensure there have been episodes of wet diapers with your baby before you take your baby home. So let's quickly talk about the eyes. Sometimes the eyes are clear during delivery, and that is why you should check your baby's eyes and check the color of the skin. If the eyes of the skin are pale yellow, when it comes to newborns, the color of your newborn should be pink, not yellow. If you're seeing that their skin is appearing yellow, or the white part of the eyes, which we call the sclerum, is appearing yellow, it's important you pay attention to these things. And do not just say, oh, you're still in the hospital, they're helping you check. That period you're in the hospital, continue to check. During that period when you're in the hospital, your caregiver is going to help you check. And it's not also out of place for you to also observe your baby's color, observe the eyes as well. And even when you've gotten, continue to check for jaundice, continue to check your baby's skin color, continue to check the color of their eyes all through the newborn phase. At any point you discover that their eyes are yellow or their skin is yellow, it's important you go to the hospital. Do not put your baby at risk because you want to be trying lots and lots of home remedies, because these have caused a lot of babies their brain. Many babies have come down with a lot of brain damage because they were kept at home and they were treating jaundice at home. Ensure your baby is managed properly. Ensure you go to the hospital. At any point in time you notice that their eyes are yellow or their skin is becoming yellow, check for these signs while you're in the hospital. As much as your caregivers will be doing all of these things, ensure you also check for these things and continue to check for these things even after you've been discharged home. Sometimes you may see eye discharge and oftentimes it may just clear off on its own. But do not make the mistake of you're seeing eye discharge and you've not mentioned it to your caregiver. At any point in time you notice eye discharge in your newborn, it is best that eye discharge is checked before you go home and start applying oat milk or breast milk or any kind of milk or any kind of home remedy. Because sometimes eye discharge could be a sign of an infection, an ongoing infection that can be serious in newborns. It's important it is checked. And even when you've gotten them, make sure you do not ignore it. At any point in time you see eye discharge in your newborn, don't be too quick to go and introduce medications or home remedies when you're not even sure the condition you're even handling in your newborn. Sometimes the baby has no illness, and the baby has no illness, the baby will be unable to pass stool. So check your baby, check the illness, check those areas around there. If you're having a male child, check for the 2 balls in the tiny sac under the penis. We check the tiny sac under the scrotum, check for 2 balls. There should be 2 balls in the scrotum if you're having a male child, and you continue to check for this even after you've gotten home as a new mom. Because in some cases it could be a case of there are no testes, which we'll call undescended testes. It's often recommended that these things are corrected in childhood. The next is if you had any underlying medical condition while you were pregnant. For instance, you had diabetes in pregnancy, which we call gestational diabetes. In an ideal scenario, baby will be monitored closely. Their blood glucose level will be monitored closely. Ensure you are acquainted with these things. Not just say, oh, they are doing it, they are checking it. Ensure they are checking it. Ensure you know what they are checking for. Don't just say, oh, it was you that had diabetes in pregnancy. No, your baby also needs to be monitored based on any medical condition that have had during pregnancy. It's important your baby is monitored closely after delivery. Some medications or vaccines may be given. So it will be vitamin K injection, which prevents bleeding in newborns. Vaccines are important to prevent common infections in under 5. Some babies can bleed excessively. That's why things like vitamin K is usually given. So ask these things, ask these questions. Don't just say, oh, I've given birth, everybody is home, the whole place is full, you're not paying attention to this thing, and when you're not getting, you don't even know where to start from. So right from the hospital, ask questions. If it makes you writing these things down, so you have like a checklist, like those who got a work guide who actually talked about having a checklist. You can have these things down, so you can ask your caregiver this question before you finally take your baby home. As soon as you put to bed, if you want to breastfeed your baby, you'll be using your baby to breast. If you're introducing infant formula, baby can be given infant formula. So it's better the quantity of feeds your baby is getting per time. And those first phases of feeding, your caregiver may be the one helping you to feed your baby, depending on what you're feeding your baby. It could be express breast milk, it could be infant formula, it could even be donor breast milk. So whatever you're giving your baby, ask the caregiver what's the quantity your baby is getting per time, so that even when you get home, you know the quantity to start from. If right from the hospital, your baby has taken maybe 60 minutes, and you say that whatever you're feeding your baby is taking just 30 minutes. These are things that are worth talking about before you leave the hospital. And after you leave the hospital, continue to feed your baby, continue to monitor what your baby is taking. Ensure you're feeding 2 hours. Ensure you're feeding your newborns every 2 hours. And as they grow, what you're giving is going to increase in quantity. The breast milk, the infant formula, whatever you're giving your newborn is going to increase in quantity. But during the initial period of the newborn phase, it's important you feed your baby every 2 hours. Do not just say, oh, baby is sleeping. No, right from the hospital, your newborn should be fed every 2 hours. So after delivery, it's important you pay attention to these things. Pay attention to your newborn, how they are responding to the outside world, how they are responding when you're breastfeeding, when you carry them, when they are crying, when they are sleeping. Observe your newborn. Pay close attention to them while you are still in the hospital before you take your baby home. And even when you take your baby home, the newborn phase is actually a very critical period. So don't just say, oh, baby is in the cot or baby is in the bed sleeping. Ensure you continue to monitor your baby. And if there's anything that may be confusing you doubt certain things, it's important your caregiver is aware and as early as possible, because newborns can be very dramatic when it comes to how they change from a very mild state to a very complicated state. So as a new mom, pay attention to these things as much as you can. Hope this video has been helpful, and I hope to see you in the next video. And until then, bye.